My husband betrayed me after paying the mortgage for years. He secretly gave the house to his mom, and now it's being auctioned while we're getting divorced. I dug deep, uncovered his twisted motives, plotted my own revenge, and now he's losing everything, including his precious dream home. I'm Emily, 38 femme, and for 3 years I was married to my husband Daniel, 37 male. Everything felt pretty ordinary in our married life until yesterday, when I discovered something in Daniel's study that turned my world upside down. Let me tell you how we met. 6 years ago, I was brand new in this city, starting a new job and trying to figure things out. Daniel was already settled here, sharing a rented condo with his 2 brothers, and his family ran a grocery store out in the suburbs. We dated for several years, during which Daniel bought a house. He covered the down payment by himself. Actually, our wedding got postponed for a while because owning a house first was seriously important to Daniel. He just had this fixation on getting his own place before settling down. But almost as soon as we finally got married, Daniel lost his job and couldn't keep up with the mortgage. I stepped in and paid it for a few months, and then he managed to land new work. The problem was, this new job didn't pay enough for him to handle the mortgage and our other expenses. So, we struck a deal. I'd pay the mortgage, and he'd add me as the co-owner on the deed. That seemed fair to me. I mean, my new job paid well, and after 2 years, I'd saved enough to buy a place of my own. So why not turn our arrangement into something secure for both of us? For the last 3 years since we got married, I've made every mortgage payment myself. Now, there were only 7 months left before the loan would be finished off. Yesterday, while home alone and bored, I decided to clean, including Daniel's study, even though he hates it when anyone touches his things in there. Don't ask why I did it this time. Maybe it was fate. So while dusting the bookshelves, I found an envelope from our housing association. Curious, I opened it. It was the most recent house deed. For a second, I was excited, thinking Daniel had finally added me as co-owner. Nope, the new owner was his mom. Yes, the house I'd been paying for the last 3 years had quietly been signed over to my mother-in-law, and Daniel never breathed a word to me about it. Looking at the date, I realized this paperwork was filed months ago. He'd kept this a secret. Something in me just broke. I suddenly felt like I was married to a total stranger. I tried to make sense of it, but honestly, there was just no good explanation that didn't make him look like a villain. I decided not to confront him immediately. Better to gather facts. I quickly took pictures of the documents so my lawyer friend could review them, and until then, I planned to act as if I knew nothing, wearing the same fake mask my husband had been behind for all these years. Update 1. Got news from my lawyer friend about the deed. It really was the most recent version, and sure enough, Daniel transferred ownership to his mom. Since only a few months of mortgage remained, the deed outlined that she would become owner once it was paid. The betrayal stung. I'd been working my tail off and making so many sacrifices to pay this mortgage, thinking we'd finally own it together, and Daniel basically handed it over to his mother without so much as a discussion. Part of me wanted to explode right then, but Daniel was out of town for work. He'd taken a new job setting up a project team in a neighboring city and was only coming back maybe once or twice a month. I decided to wait until we could look each other in the face. It was probably for the best though, because the extra time let me focus on plotting my next move. I didn't even set out to get revenge. It just happened almost naturally. About a week after I found the deed, Daniel texted me to remind me about the latest mortgage payment. That message sent me over the edge. I decided right then that I would never pay for his amis again. The word's wrong, but I get what it means. I went to the bank, switched all contact info, phone number, and email from Daniel's to mine. He had to confirm it, so I just told him it was so I could receive payment reminders, and he didn't object. Once it was done, I ignored every email and call from the bank about missed payments. 3 months went by and I got a warning. If I missed a couple more, the house would be auctioned. Honestly, bring it on. But I also wanted to get to the bottom of why Daniel had done this. For some context, Daniel's family is from the southern part of the country, and growing up, they'd always struggled financially. His dad started from scratch, raising 4 kids, Daniel plus 3 siblings, so home ownership was always out of reach for them. Daniel often used to talk about his dream of having his own house that his parents never could. He always said he wanted his kids to grow up with the stability that he'd missed. I never suspected any hidden intentions. I totally get being emotionally attached to a house and wanting to give your parents something they never had. But spending my money without my knowledge? That crossed the line. It was obvious from then on, our marriage was falling apart. We were both going through the motions, playing cat and mouse and mind games. I used to be the one setting up romantic date nights, but I stopped, and Daniel never seemed to care. With him working most of the time in the other city, I had space to breathe, honestly. If anything big happened, I'd update again. Update 2. Thanks for the comments and advice, everyone. A few people suggested I try to find out the real reason behind Daniel's move, rather than just assuming things and blowing up our lives over guesswork, and even my lawyer friend said the same. So, I tried to do a little digging myself, but after turning things over endlessly, I just couldn't crack it. Of course, I wondered if he was cheating too. I checked his phone while he was in town. Nothing there. Finally, I bit the bullet and hired a PI to follow Daniel and dig into his background. It wasn't cheap, but it felt worth it to get some clarity. After about a month, the PI gave me their report. Most of it confirmed what I already knew about the house deed, family history, etc. But there was something new. Daniel's ex, Katie, wasn't just a regular ex. She'd been his fiancée and they were engaged. Apparently, things fell apart about a month before they were supposed to get married, a year before I even met him. So that was before me and not technically cheating. But still, Daniel never mentioned any of this to me, and that felt like a huge omission. I found Katie online. She was married now, and her father was in real estate. After a little deliberation, I went to her office. Showing up at her house as a stranger would have been weird. I introduced myself as Daniel's wife and explained I just wanted to talk for a few minutes. She was hesitant at first, but after I told her about the mess Daniel put me in, the house, the mortgage, everything, she actually laughed and told me that he'd finally managed to trap someone into getting a house for him. She explained everything. She and Daniel met at a party through mutual friends and dated for a year. Daniel always talked about his dream of owning a house. Because her dad was in real estate, Katie tried to find Daniel some good deals, but he kept rejecting them, saying they were too expensive. Katie already lived in a house her father had gifted her, so Daniel moved in with her. But after they got engaged, Daniel started pushing Katie to transfer the title of her house to his name. She tried to reason with him. It shouldn't matter whose name was on the papers if they were building a life together. But Daniel used his sob stories about his parents never having their own place and how it meant everything to him to finally call a house his own. Katie came close to agreeing, but her father stepped in. He said Daniel could be added as a co-owner, but only if he signed a prenup saying that if they divorced, Katie would keep the house. And under no circumstances could Daniel sell or transfer it. Daniel refused. The engagement ended. When I shared my own story of supporting Daniel through the mortgage, again with the promise I'd be co-owner, Katie just smiled knowingly. According to her, this was a pattern, all an act to trap women into helping Daniel realize his housing dreams. Katie went on to say that Daniel's family was very conservative. They'd only agreed to let him marry her in the first place because she came from money. In Katie's case, Daniel's mother was extremely aggressive in pushing the title transfer. In one argument, Daniel's mom actually admitted she didn't like modern girls of our ethnicity because we were too headstrong. That checked out to me. I never got along with Daniel's family. Actually, I barely saw them at all. Daniel kept me at arm's length, saying he didn't want his family's old-fashioned views to interfere with my peace. Katie said this was just to stop me from seeing through their manipulations. After everything Katie told me, I asked if she thought Daniel could have changed. She said she doubted it. Apparently, the plan was always this: get the house, dump the outside wife, marry a girl from his own background, one who'd be traditional and submissive. When I asked why Daniel hadn't married someone from his community from the start, Katie simply said, because they can't afford to give him a house. Suddenly, divorce seemed like the only real option, even though I'd been denying it to myself up to that point. Hearing everything from Katie confirmed for me that Daniel never loved me. He just saw me as another mark to get what he wanted. For everyone who thinks I was evil for letting the house go to auction without confronting Daniel face to face, I'll say this: I'm not justifying myself. Daniel tricked me to benefit himself, and now he can face the consequences. Even if he didn't plan to divorce me, he lied and hid everything, and his intentions were always selfish. I don't care about how he feels anymore. I've been hurt too much. Update 3. I've been waiting for this moment. The house is finally up for auction. After 6 months of missed payments and completely ignoring bank calls, I got an email. The the mortgage had reached the final deadline for payment. Daniel happened to be in town then, but I made sure that letter never reached him. The day it arrived, I took it out of our mailbox and destroyed it. Cruel? Maybe, but I honestly didn't care at this point. Then, last month, bank officials appeared at the house and explained what happens after so many defaults. If I didn't pay within 30 days, the house would go up for auction. I just nodded and said I understood, and honestly, if it went up for sale, that was fine by me. Bonus, since the mortgage is solely in Daniel's name, the financial and legal responsibility as a defaulter is all on him, not me. The bank agents warned that his credit score would be destroyed for years. That's his problem now. I got a notice from the bank requiring the owner to be there for the auction. They have to sign the final paperwork. That would technically be Daniel, since the mortgage was still in his name, but since he'd transferred ownership to his mother, I wasn't sure how it would shake out. For anyone curious, my lawyer friend explained to me that the bank owns the house until the mortgage is entirely paid. Only after that would Daniel, or whoever, get the title, which could then be transferred. So that deed I found was just a kind of will stating Daniel's intentions for after the mortgage was paid. Regardless, Daniel broke his promise to make me co-owner. After everything Katie said, I knew there was nothing good behind his actions. I was convinced at this point. Daniel had never been honest with me. Update 4. The house is sold, and after a ton of drama, I'm relieved I didn't let Daniel and his family manipulate me. Here's what happened. I had no idea how bank house auctions even work. I figured it was like any other auction. The highest bidder gets the house and then moves in. We pack up and go. It doesn't work exactly like that. The bank lists the house for an amount that covers the remaining principal and interest. Meanwhile, they serve us with an eviction notice. As soon as I got the notice, I went ahead and rented myself a new place. I moved everything that belonged to me. The furniture, decor, over. The only things I left behind were Daniel's clothes and personal items, which I packed and left in the garage. The bank told me they'd call when a buyer came through, and then Daniel would have to sign to transfer possession. I was waiting for the sale before telling Daniel, but he showed up unannounced, found the house locked, and his stuff sitting outside. He called me in a panic, asking where I was. I just told him it was over. The house was no longer his. The bank had seized it. He freaked out, shouting at me on the phone about why his things were outside. I hadn't warned him, demanding to know how it happened. I just said I was at work, busy, and if you wanted details, he could come meet me at a cafe near my office after work. Of course, he didn't wait. He showed up at my office an hour later, furious. I let him sweat until I finished my day. When we did talk, he went off. What did I do? How could I let this happen? I played innocent, saying I stopped paying because I couldn't afford it, and I never imagined the consequences. Maybe if we were in public, he'd have gone ballistic. He kept ranting about how the house was his dream, and then, in a moment of frustration, blurted out that he only married outside his community, against his parents' wishes, so he could gain something for himself. That was a punch in the gut, but I didn't back down. After he finished blowing up, I showed him the deed I'd found in his study. He tried to explain, claimed that his parents saved for years to help with the down payment, so he transferred the house to his mom for their happiness. He argued that since his parents were already elderly, the house would eventually stay with us. Total nonsense. I pressed him. Why didn't he mention any of this? Why didn't he add me as co-owner like he'd promised? And why had he hidden his whole past with Katie? He looked stunned when I said her name, then straight out insulted her, saying she'd lied to me. I told him the house wasn't sold yet, and if he wanted to save it, he could always clear the debt himself. He admitted he didn't have the money and begged me to help. I refused. Then he threatened me, saying he'd divorce me and accuse me of fraud for defaulting on the loan. I told him to go ahead and warned him I'd demand back every penny I'd contributed over the last 3 years. That same day, his mom called and asked to meet. Up to this point, the woman had hardly ever spoken to me, but now she was suddenly all sugar and charm. Of course, her only reason for reaching out was to ask, beg really, that I save the house. I asked, why does it matter, since it's not her house anymore? She got cold and called me a big-mouthed local girl who thinks too much, a direct echo of what Katie had said. She warned that Daniel would divorce me and marry a girl of his community, as if that were some threat that would make me back down. I literally laughed. I told her times have changed. Threatening a woman with divorce won't get you far today. That same night, I called my lawyer friend and asked her to serve divorce papers. demanding repayment for my mortgage contributions and additional compensation. I don't know if Daniel can pay me back. Frankly, I don't care. He preyed on my emotions for years, and he deserves the consequences. When he got the divorce papers, he called me, begged me to change the terms, and told me his parents would have to sell their store if he had to pay. I made it clear I wasn't budging, and that was that. I'll update after the divorce is final. In the meantime, I'm living my life again. 7 months have passed since everything blew up, and honestly, I'm over it. There are no kids involved, so the whole thing is a little easier to move on from. I feel free. That wraps up the whole story. This story really shows how people can be blinded by family ties and selfish dreams, leading them to manipulate those closest to them. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to restore, especially when emotional and financial deception is involved. Here is a question for you. Do you think Emily was right to let the house go to auction? And would you have handled Daniel's betrayal any differently? Share your thoughts below.